Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild Review, my written and video view series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the player supplement Way of the Druid, designed by DM Conclave for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shoutouts to my platinum patrons, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Manuel, Basil, Christopher, Dave, Star Loverly, and Gaston. And gold patrons, RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy Numa, Marcos, Did Vicente, Gilberto, Adam, Dead Lizard, Lion, Sam, Ross, Lumpy Spuds, Jerome, Fatboy 619, Scalenia, Nick, and Party McButterpants. Thank you all very much for your support. I initially thought that Way of the Druid would be kind of a comprehensive guide to playing druids, but instead it is still a guide for druids, but it offers a lot of new features. 5 new subclasses, 3 new backgrounds, as well as a system for gathering herbs, and then a bunch of over 20 different herbs that have different effects, and then recipes for those herbs that you could craft using herbalism kits, and those all have different effects. Some new druid spells, some new weapons and armor. It's fairly comprehensive, and there's a little bit of lore in there as well for the factions. Unfortunately, the main appeal, I'm guessing, for all of you, would be the new subclasses and possibly new backgrounds. And that is, for me, the weakest part of this book. I was, I don't know if it was disappointed is the right word, but they're kind of all over the place. I feel like there's some overlap with at least 2 of them. And there's very much some imbalance going on. One of them is just kind of boring. Like, I kind of have a different problem with all of them, and none of them were I particularly enthusiastic with. And the backgrounds are kind of even worse than that, so that's a big bummer. But thankfully, it is a 60-plus page supplement, so that is not the only thing that's included in here. And in fact, it's all those other little bits that are included that I think helps kind of make up for the fact that I don't like the main event. It is a well-constructed supplement. It looks very nice. It uses the kind of the standard 5e build layout style. It's got a lot of nice big kind of half-page artwork, which is kind of cool. Fair warning, one of the druid circles is the circle of the Arachnid, and there's at least one fairly large picture of I think a tarantula-looking spider, so if that's going to upset you, I don't know where the timestamp's going to be on that, but that is going to come up at some point. But you can kind of skip ahead maybe to the end and hear my pros and cons and final thoughts to get a grasp of the overall feelings I have here. If you're not cool with looking at spiders, damn you, Tolkien, you've ruined it for all of us with the spiders, which it's really hard to get through fantasy RPGs in general with a spider phobia. I feel for all of you. I'm not a big fan. I can get through seeing them and being attacked by them in digital space, but freaking everywhere, man. So I guess we should go over the subclasses first. It does have a little bit of lore information about druids, circles, and hierarchy. It's kind of interesting, but I guess if your player really wants to get into being a druid, the weird thing I thought here is the fact that you're not even a ranked druid until level 9. You're considered an initiate for the first 8 levels. I get being an initiate for level 1 or 2, but given that by the time you're a level 9 adventurer, you are a known quantity for sure. You're a badass. At level 6 to 7, 8, you should be a pretty much a badass by that in your region. And you're an initiate druid? What? That doesn't make any sense. So that part's a little wonky for me, but I can appreciate that there's a little ranking system, and there are some mechanical benefits. You can cast certain spells like control weather or commune with nature once per day if you're of a certain rank. So if you want to create this little side plot with your druid player character, I think that would be pretty cool. Or as a player, you want to bring this to your DM's table, because I do think this is mainly for this supplement is mainly for players to use, although there's things that your DM is going to need to know about in general. And also it talks about different factions and some lore about each of the new circles provided. I like the layout. It's organized a little wonkily. I feel like all of the lore stuff should have been together, so Chapter 4 and 1 should have been put together, and then Chapter 2 and 3 should have just been combined. I don't like that we talk about the Circle of Iron, and then we go through each circle's history and lore information, and then the next chapter is each mechanical rules for all the different subclasses. I don't know why that wasn't just all put together. So we'll skip to chapter 3 to look at that. So chapter 3, the Circle of Iron. Now, one of the things that most folks, even if you've never played a druid, probably are aware of is that druids have a big no-no against using metal. They are all about nature, and metal is, I guess, an affront to nature. And the Circle of Iron is pro metal. They love the metal. They're, of course, shunned by most other druids. It's a very kind of taboo thing to do, and their thing is all about metal. But the abilities they get are really nuts. You kind of combine like a Magneto's powers with the T-1000 from Terminator, and then eventually can morph into an Iron Golem. It is batshit crazy. Like, I appreciate at second level, you can, manipulate. It almost reminds me of like a wizard school, where it's like a kind of a minor ability, but you could use it kind of in an RP way, or maybe in combat. As an action, you can like manipulate a metal object, so maybe you could like bend an enemy's sword or something as an action, and obviously you gain proficiency with heavy armor and martial weapons. But basically from there it gets really crazy, because you start getting Magneto powers where you can telekinetically like move objects and people around with a crazy rate. It's like 90 feet per turn. That's insane. You could just drag somebody who's wearing heavy armor that far. 90 feet per turn is really kind of nuts. And then at level 6, you can turn your arms, into like weapons and be like basically the T-1000 mode. And then at level 14, you can transform into an Iron Golem. Now, in case you're not aware, I will remind you, Iron Golem is one of the most powerful creatures in the monster manual. Might not seem that way at first, but it's got 20 armor class, 200 hit points. It's immune to just about everything. It's got magic resistance. It's got multiple attacks. If you're sick of your druids, your the moon druid that can transform really well, if you're sick of that person transforming into a huge hit point meat bag and just becoming the tank of the party just because it's such a good ability, holy shit, being able to transform into an Iron Golem. Now, granted, you do have to use both of your wild shapes, but still, it's really freaking powerful. Like, it lasts for an hour. I mean, you would just be god of combat. You would be showing up everybody, and the fact that you can do it at 14, you can transform into CR16. It's crazy. Like, that's way powerful. So this is the one that I feel like is really unbalanced, because you can just do so much. There's so many abilities here that's kind of all over the place with using metal. It's like, well, why? If this is what happens when druids do metal, like, yeah, like, why would you not be a Circle of Iron? Like, holy crap, those are amazing abilities. The next two, and we're going to come up, I think, against the spider picture right there. Yep. Circle of Brood and Circle of Arachnid they should have been combined into one class, and I think some of the abilities should have been combined into one idea instead of having to separate these two things. And it just kind of borrows some things that, unfortunately, we've also seen. This was designed before Tasha's, and I think we're seeing some things from Tasha's, like the Barbarian Path of the Beast, who can like grow the tail, and stab, or the claws and thing. That's kind of partly what these what one of the subclasses can do. I believe the Arachnid can do it later on. I actually kind of like the idea of the Brood Keeper, which again this was before, I believe, the Circle of the Swarm is it that druids can do. Where they can have insects. This one is a lot more grotesque, where the insects live inside of you, and you can call them forth as a action, basically. I think it's once per long rest. And you basically just summon forth your own swarm of insects for an hour. But thematically, it's really interesting, because it's just gross as hell. I mean, that's horror movie shit, to be able to open your mouth and just fucking like bees or ants or something crawl out. Like, that is messed up. But you could see where the RP thing could be really crazy with that. The bummer is it's not till 10th level. That's like the whole reason you would take this class, would be for that ability. You don't get it till level 10. There's a lot of campaigns that never get that high. So I don't like the idea that you have to wait that long. Instead, the early ability is you can just transform into an insect. And weirdly enough, the 6th level ability is you can gain a carapace of an insect, but it specifically doesn't work when you're transforming. So it's like mutually exclusive with your other class ability. Very, very odd. And then the Arachnid one can also get that, but not till like 10th level, where they can manifest the Scorpion Stinger. And it can do the same thing with the Summoning the Swarm, but this time it's a Fey one and not from your body. It just feels like all of these should have been combined into one general like insectoid class. And then the swarming ability should have been the level 3rd ability, I think, because that would have been the cool, like, here's why you take this class. And then maybe further abilities could have, you maybe do more with that concept or give you more uses of it or something. So I think there are some good ideas here, but as written, you almost need to like take an editor and like fix all the things and move them around to different areas, change the numbers a bit, and at least combine those two classes. I like the idea of an insect-based druid class. I think that's really cool, but I don't like the idea that we're getting two separate ideas here, and they're just kind of a hodgepodge of things that now we've seen in the player's handbook and like Tasha's and stuff done probably more effectively. Circle of the Sea may be the only one I don't have a huge problem with necessarily, although weirdly enough, at second level, you just gain an animal familiar. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think earlier versions of D&D, the druid just got an animal familiar. That was part of, like, being a druid. It's like druids and rangers both got animal companions. So it's kind of weird to circle back to that. And obviously, a lot of them would not be very, a lot of aquatic animals would not be useful in a normal campaign because you're not typically in water for an entire campaign. And the designer seems to realize that and gives you instead, like, semi-aquatic, like snakes and frogs and crocodiles and that kind of thing that you can summon and have be your companion. That's fine. I like the Song of the Sea is kind of a fun idea where you can give off like this whale song and kind of charm, incapacitate everybody around you. That's neat. You can turn yourself into a water form, a liquid version, so the other end of the T-1000. Instead of manifesting the weapons, you just turn into liquid. You gain swimming speed, dark vision. You can squeeze into stuff. Your AC becomes your wisdom plus your dex. You're kind of a monk at that point, I guess. Just kind of an interesting ability. So I guess out of all of them, Circle of the Sea is not horrible. And then Circle of Elements, I don't know what we were going for here because all that you get is a bunch of spells. All the way up until 6th level, your whole thing is you just gain a couple spells, a couple like wizard sorcerer spells. At 6th level, you gain immunity to one element, which granted is very powerful, but also kind of boring. You don't really do anything with that. 10th level, you can cast Conjure Element once without expending a spell. So it just sounds like a Warlock Invocation. Like, okay, that's fine. Elemental Surge is a really cool ability, reminding me of a insane version of what the Barbarian can do, where you have like an AoE effect around you with the, what was that Barbarian called? Where you do the land effect and you could choose whatever land you want. I feel like that's kind of what this should have done, maybe, but instead it's just a level 14th ability. It's a pretty powerful, cool ability, like, lava pillars and ferocious winds battering things. So that's neat, but again, not till 14th level. So it doesn't make up for the fact that the class is boring as hell up until then. So unfortunately, kind of a thumbs down on most of those subclasses, to me at least, and I'm generally a fan of the Druid, so that's definitely disappointing. There is a little bit of a chapter on the existing Druid factions as well as some new ones, so the Emerald Enclave, and I think it goes like good, neutral, and evil the way the designer presented these. Emerald Enclave, generally a good-natured Druid faction, the Hive kind of a neutral, and we introduced a lot of insect-based stuff, so that's kind of where this faction's from, and then the Shadow Circle, which is basically just evil Druids that want to actually destroy civilization and just see nature take over. So some nice little information in there. It doesn't necessarily give us like from what I can tell, like examples or like NPCs or story hooks or anything like that, which would have been really nice to have. But there's some little bit of information here which you could play with as a druid and maybe get some story ideas or background information for yourself. Speaking of backgrounds, this is where I thought we would get some more cool ideas, but instead, first of all, way too long. A couple paragraphs to explain what it is. All they are is just slightly nature reskins of existing backgrounds. Like, to me, the most important, interesting element of a background is the traits, bonds, and flaws. The stuff that helps you build a character's personality. That is what's helpful with the background. Like, and that feeds into like what kind of character were you? What were you doing before? Were you an urchin? Were you an acolyte? Were you a pirate? Like what? And they're designed to be ostensibly for like level 1 characters, like what were you before becoming an adventurer, essentially. Whereas one of these, the Lore Keeper, the way it's written is like, you have transcended knowledge itself. You are you've amassed an unimaginable amount of lore pertaining to a specific field of study concerning nature and the history of evolution and progress, or the magical intricacies of the natural world and beyond. What? That's a background before you became an adventurer? I mean, I guess you could be a level 1 adventurer and be like, a 50-year-old person or something and have all that knowledge accumulated, but it feels weird to already have that level of understanding. And the actual ability is quite useful. Now, I will argue, and this is a problem in D&D 5e, is that the background features are usually completely forgotten by the time you start leveling up, and they're usually things that hardly ever come up. They're very niche. They don't have a lot of mechanical usage. They suck, basically. They just suck. So I don't expect them to be very good when people offer features, and it makes me raise an eyebrow when they're exceptionally good. In this case, for that one specifically, Insightful, you can double your proficiency bonus basically when using any kind of nature-themed checks, whether it's through nature, history, or arcana, if it has to do with like animals or plants or something. That's actually extremely useful. It basically gives yourself expertise on certain information to recall. Whereas other ones are kind of back to like doing RP, like the recycling one of the scavenger, you can make like bone knives and stuff, and they have thankfully there is information in there for using that for the scavenger, but you wouldn't have to use this background. And for example, the lore keeper just says you can use the tables for the sage background, and for the nature's bulwark you can use the table for the acolyte background. It's just basically you're an acolyte in the woods, or you're a sage who just only researched like plants and animals and stuff. They just don't feel like fully featured backgrounds. They're just kind of rethemed or reskins of the existing backgrounds. Then we get into stuff that I can start giving a thumbs up to, which is good, which are the herbs, the recipes, the spells, basically all the rest of the content that takes up the second half of this supplement. So gathering herbs, I wish there was a better rule for this in the player handbook, because that's something I appreciate from a lot of MMOs and RPGs, just running around hitting a button to gather some kind of plant, getting some ingredients, crafting stuff. Like, I don't need a whole bunch of rules about it, but I just like to be able to do that as an additional step to playing those games. And in tabletop RPGs, it becomes an interesting thing of, does the player want to do this? Are they interested in it? And then can we craft interesting and non pain in the ass rules to keep track of what we're gathering and what we're making? And I think this one does a pretty decent job of that. We get over 20 different ingredients, but the herbs themselves all have effects also. They do have gathering times, which, I mean, whatever. How does it take you an hour to gather moss? Whatever. But they all have different effects, which is nice. I mean, they can give off light, they can stabilize people who are downed, they can give off noxious fumes, they can increase your movement speed. Nothing is going to take the place of a spell, which is a key here, because you're just gathering the herb itself and using it. So it's all very, very light, minor stuff, but it's interesting enough that the characters that are interested in doing this kind of thing, namely your nature-themed characters, could have some fun doing this, and it offers a chance for you as a DM to give this either as loot or just as something to do while you're traveling, or maybe as downtime, just some other aspect that I would actually be interested in introducing in a campaign if my players were interested in that. So first we have all of these herbs that can all be used for various effects just by gathering them. And then we have recipes that can be used, given an herbalism kit and a crafting DC, because you've got proficiency and you've actually got a number tied to that, and some monetary costs. So you calculate all of that together, as well as some time spent, but that's the part that always makes me roll my eye. Like, it's not going to take you a month to make an ointment. Come on, nobody's freaking doing that. Don't give me that realism bullshit either. I can get a level 5 character, can jump off a 4-story building and be perfectly fine. Like, we're not dealing in realism here. You can craft whatever you want as soon as you can craft, in my opinion. But I do like that there's a gold cost, because there should be some kind of sunk cost there for that, and frankly, people are swinging gold anyway. There needs to be some kind of gold sink in these crafting systems. And there's a crafting DC, and it mentions that if you fail, you only lose about half the gold, and I think maybe half the ingredients. I would have even gone a little bit further and had a little bit of a range there, and made it, if you like crit fail or you go from 1 to 5 or something, then you lose everything. If you do it from this to this, then you don't make it, but you lose some of the ingredients, but you keep some. And if you make it from here to here, you make it, and then all the way up to like you crit, maybe you make 2 of them or something. That'd be kind of cool. But either way, there's a skill check involved, and these are basically crafting potions. And they're not all obviously just health or poison potions. There's some that grant you dark vision. There's some that give you just advantage on certain checks. There's one that like puffs out some paralyzing smoke. There's one that you can all breathe in, the healing vapors. One of them gives you, underwater breathing. Just a whole lot of different effects. Again, similar to the herbs. If your players are into this kind of thing, you want to introduce an interesting gold sink. I do think the gold cost and the time is ridiculous, but that's also kind of a problem in 5e, where they just went way overboard with a lot of their rules for like crafting magic items and things. They were, I guess, afraid players would go nuts with that. But honestly, it's up to you, to the DM, in terms of what ingredients you're giving them anyway. Just gauge based on their goal. Nobody's going to spend look at this, 125,000 to craft a legendary. Like, no, like, stop that. Just stop. It's just stop. I don't care how powerful it is. No, don't do that. But I like the concept here. I think the rules, except for the upper end, it gets a little nuts, are pretty solid, and I just think it's fun to be able to introduce some kind of herbalism, herb gathering mechanic to the game, and I appreciate that all these rules are here. We also get some druidic equipment, so this is specifically druid-themed adventuring gear, weapons, armor, shields, all of that. Basically, like, a lot of this is just flavor, which is fine, I think, especially because it's part of a bigger supplement that has other, useful stuff in it. So if your druid wants to wield, bone sword and bone shield, that's fine. And they can, technically a scavenger background could craft that, or just whatever. If anybody wants to lash that shit together, I'm probably not going to stop them. It's just kind of cool flavoring, and if your player wants to do that, fine. There are rules for that, just so you can kind of gauge, like, okay, what is this in terms of where it falls on the armor spiel, in terms of a seashell armor versus crystal armor and all that. That can be kind of helpful. But I like the idea of having those kind of flavors for naturalistic armor and weapons, which I think is very flavorful for a druid. A little bit of magic items, some spells, which the spells are actually pretty decent. Spells are very hard. There's so many spells by now that cover just about everything you could ever want. And I think there's a pretty good job of just doubling down on the druid-ass spells. So, like, being able to warp wood, being able to, like, heal people that have bark skin on them, volcanic eruption, make a little house out of a tree. Just, specific stuff to nature, obviously, for the druid spells is good. And then rounding it out, there are some stat blocks for if you are the, I believe, the Brood, Circle of Brood, who can transform into giant insects, which, again, I would kind of rather do just the swarming thing rather than the insect thing, rather than the giant insect transformation, but maybe make that a upper level ability. Just all of that needs to be kind of rebalanced and rejiggered for those classes, but thankfully the rest of it kind of makes up for it. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Way of the Druid. Pros: over 20 gatherable herbs with a variety of beneficial and poisonous effects, as well as 20 herbalism recipes with crafting rules and costs. Those are two different pros, but they go hand in hand, where I really like that system of having a herb gathering system in the game, have it make sense, have it be easy, and have them all give various cool effects, benefits, or like poisons, that kind of thing. Pro: druid-themed weapons, armor, and adventuring gear. I do think that's pretty fun if you want to play a flavorful druid who's only wielding bone stuff or sea stuff, seashell things. That can be really fun looking, even if it doesn't have any kind of mechanical changes. Fine, like, just have those things start out the gate. Or as a DM, you can look at that, look at what your player wants to be, and then choose that as the base, and then add, magical properties on top of that too. Pros: the supplement looks nice. It's got a nice layout with large art pieces. I like the way it's put together. Giant artwork, and generally just good paragraph breaks. Everything else, just, it looks nice. It's fun to flip through. Cons: the new druid subclasses are either imbalanced, like iron, overlapping, like Brood and Arachnid, or boring, like elements. I didn't have one particular over-encompassing problem, other than I was kind of disappointed with generally all of those subclasses. None of them just really spoke to me. None of them really worked out of the gate for me. And the other con is the new backgrounds are a little more than just reskins of existing backgrounds from the player handbook. Not really any more information I can use there. Final verdict: all the extra content from Way of the Druid, such as new herbs, recipes, spells, and weapons, help make up for the lackluster new subclasses and backgrounds. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.